And remember to accept the recording process to continue. And we have to welcome again with the gratitude in our heart to Professor Rafael Cárdenas, Dr. Rafael Cárdenas, that is sharing a lot of information from his research project. Everybody, we all know that he's studying a PhD, and it takes a lot of effort to make this amount of information, research of this amount of information, and keep it organized. So please, let's welcome Professor Rafael Cárdenas, that is more than ready to close this third week of this deep study of the translation and interpretation that, believe me, is another world. We have done it as a job. We have really got experience, but nothing compared to what Rafael is sharing. Thank you, Dr. Cárdenas. Everything was just technical, but now that you are sharing a lot of theory, it really will help a lot the future translators of Panama. Keep the mic now.
All right.
The audience is all yours.
Thank you. So good morning, everybody. So today is Friday. Today's Friday after 4 days of our third week during the program. I'm gonna do some a rundown of what it is that we have in classroom first of all, because I think it's very important for us to become aware of what that is. What it is that is spending, what it is that is new, and so forth. Just for everybody to have a clear idea. I want to make sure we all agree on what's new. Okay, in classroom, I've posted several things that I think are new, right? So it will be good for me to go ahead and share. Bear with me a second here. So, all right. Okay, here is my classroom. I hope this is hearing clearly. Okay, so what do you have over here? Well, under the tab of classwork, you're gonna run into different topics that have been added, right? When we started, we only had like seminar resources for reading and the reading guide. So this is essentially based on the work by Remy Attig, right? That book on translation for real life context, real world context. After that, we had summative assessment number 1, which I hope you already submitted to me. Comparative linguistics, you have some interesting books over here. The one on Vasquez Sayora's material. And from that, we have some work also in this platform that involves segmentation. I added yesterday 2 more books here to under this section on additional resources for translation. Okay, let me see if I get there very quickly and share what we have over here. All right, now I have 10 books here for you, right? There are 10 books over here. And The books that I added yesterday were The Eight Stages of Translation, which is an interesting book that deals with poetry translation or literary translation of poetry type of texts, right? So that deserves special treatment, and that's one of those that we need to learn more about and practice a lot about too. I also added a book on translation and decolonization so as to connect translation with what is transpiring with our societies that are on this road of becoming freer and less dependent on stronger or larger countries or more influential countries with a lot of political weight, right? Political weight and that kind of relationship, which is asymmetric and imbalanced. This book deals with a lot of that. I also added, in case you haven't checked, one that's named The Third Language, Recurrent Problems in Translation into English, in translating into English. This is a very good one too. I think it's worth your time that you go over this one. This is the author is Michael Duff for this one. I also included here some sociocultural aspects of translating and interpreting, so as for us to go back a little bit more into proverbs, sayings, folklore, information, of this nature that's very difficult to translate in general terms. And the rest of them have been already there. I strongly urge you to download everything by Sunday, March 22nd, because I'll be taking down everything from here, all of this material, because it's taking up a lot of my Gmail account space, right? What I need to discuss right now also is some documents that I already informed you we would be presenting. I'm going to proceed and go ahead and talk about this in a minute. But it's also important that you take a look at the last message I left last night. It was a friendly reminder that you have to expect 2 PowerPoints with corresponding analysis worksheets. I am not overwhelming anybody, so I'm going to very calmly upload this under a new topic, and that is going to be entitled Assessment Activity Number 3, all right, or Summative Activity or Summative Assessment Number 3. That's the name I'm planning to, use for that one. And that is analysis that you need to do about the material presented during the first 3 weeks or the initial 3 weeks of the seminar, which is like the beginning and a bit beyond halfway, right? Beyond halfway. So we've had plenty of information presented. What I would like you is to take the time to download a sheet, which is going to be a Microsoft Word document, for you to go ahead and plan, reflect on what we discuss here concerning the history of translation that is valid for what we do at present, and also the rest of the information that contains the untranslatable idiomatic expressions, proverbs, and that kind that need an equivalent, because there is no way you can provide for them equivalents in a word-for-word fashion. It doesn't work. So you need to provide some memory in there. Also, I'm including their cognates. As you know, this is a major topic in translation. So this is all in process. We're going to be away for a longer break this time for the rest of the month of March, all April, May, June, and July. So this is going to be over 4 months, That is why you need to come back to classroom and check out on the PowerPoint assignments, which I'm at present preparing for you. That's going to be our third summative activity or summative assessment. The first one was a reaction paper. right? Reaction paper. That was our first one. Our second one is going to be the analysis that you will do of a section of Estrategias de Traducción, Brinton, White, Cruz, and Ortiz book, which is here, which I hope you have already downloaded, right? In case you don't know which one that is the second on the right on the right row, because you have two rows of ebooks, one on the left, one on the right. The second one on the right, that is the book. That's a major book also, and that's going to be that's the one that contains our second summative assessment. Third summative assessment, I'm about to post it, right? Because that's going to be as I told you, working on PowerPoint material. I'm going to be granting you the material, not every single one of those slides, because believe it or not, I've been presenting here over 400 slides. So I don't think that's going to be possible, but at least I'm going to do a curated selection of the most important and relevant ones. And I'm going to be asking, for your analysis. And you can do that during the four months or so that we're going to be away from studying. What is non-negotiable is the taking down of all these ebooks. So bear that in mind, please. All right, let me go back now to the general, to the topics. And here in the topics, you have a section entitled Documentos Constitutivos de un Grupo de Investigación, Vicerrectoría de Investigación y Posgrado, UP, right? UP, University of Panama. Okay, here you have 3 documents that I think are worth your reading, right? The first one, 031, is a form for the requesting of the formation of a group, okay? Once I get word of you, right, because you're gonna email me or call me, I hope. Either you call me or you chat or you email, informing me officially of your interest in, being a part of a research group, then I'll have to fill these out. I'm gonna go ahead and do it. And this information on the research topics that we're going to be focusing on, they call it here líneas de investigación, right? And I'm going to appoint myself as the coordinator for the group. So here I have spaces for 4 people who could join the group, and some potential projects in mind, right? That we could go ahead and solve, right? Also, we could have a logo for our group, some publications by member in case you have some published material, an abstract of the publications with bibliographical information and access to publications through a PDF. So this is it, right? We can do this, and this is going to be the first step in the process. But this is coming after you confirm to me that you are really interested in something like this. The second document that I'm going to be filling out is this. Is the very much the form that states our official status, right, as a research group. And over here, I'm going to fill this out, right? Information concerning the names, coordination, and research or researchers or so. And down here, it's going to be necessary for us to present this to the dean also, and to the graduate vice rectory office, corresponding office. So I need stamp and seals and signature for all this, because this is official. In order to make this official, this is the second step. Document 033 is the model of a research plan, and I also need to fill these out, right? This is dated 2022, but it's a valid document because I downloaded this from Vice Rectory downloadables, and this is still valid. I mean, good condition. I think we can still do all of this. This hasn't changed yet, or they haven't changed it for any reason. So we're going to continue providing here some more general information and action plan. And here are some possible things we could compete for, right? A research project for what they call Convocatoria Universitaria para Fondos de Investigación. This is the yearly research fund competition that grants, I think, probably, I don't know if it's, I don't know how many thousands of dollars. Last time, I think it was, I don't remember exactly how many, the funds exactly, how much money that is. But I know it's a handsome number. Possible projects for a Senacit event that is held at national scale. We could also compete for that and go for some research and development, what they call investigación y desarrollo. That's another call for research projects or research proposals. So this is it. Other possible projects for other organizations, such as FAO or others locally, mostly headquartered at Ciudad del Saber, right? Some possible goals also, which are important, the generation of some product or services derived from research. I don't know. We could get creative and write a book. Who knows? You have books, book chapters, maybe patents, brands, different kinds of services, things that the university produces that have a great deal of value. This is how the academy links with society, the rest of society, either through government or international organizations, right? Some possible information that should be added is that you should set up a Google Scholar account for your publication or ResearchGate profile. You need an ORCID number. All this, you can get it online, no problem. I don't think it's a problem, but you're going to need it for publication. And we could also organize some seminars that can help the English department. Some proposed seminars are a seminar for the preparation of research projects. We could set up this seminar for the department and offer it here to continuing education, maybe, or to the English department. So whichever way it works, we could set this up and get more people involved in this. Some seminar on the preparation of what they call scientific communication, right? That's research paper writing, and the information that people need. And there could be other seminars and training more into the translation, if you want, translation technology, translation of trying to propose also that the university could probably go ahead and get involved in the certification of translators, not so much to leave that in the hands of Meduca and politicians, that they don't care much about any occupation, really. They just don't care about any. Some exchanges, if that is possible. Very few people here in our department study anything on translation studies or conference interpreting. We could probably go ahead and get in touch with some embassies and discover what opportunities there are within all of this. This also requires what they call a chronogram, right? A chronological sequence of events by month and so on. Some of the resources necessary that could be our own or funding that could be requested from through some organization maybe, and I need to take responsibility for this now. This is all going to come true if you guys decide that you are interested, and if you have some interest in publishing, facilitating seminars, um, setting up your Google Scholar ResearchGate profiles, obtaining your ORCID, publishing something right now, you know, um, if you're interested as a college or university level professor, faculty member, if you're going to continue working at Meduca, I don't think it makes any sense for you to join any of this, because this is aimed at a work that is going to be developed at the university level. So you make up your minds and communicate with me. You can call me anytime, or chat directly. You have my number, 68697929, 68697929. Give me a call, or chat to me, or send me an email. You have my email account also. It's rafa.2020.up@gmail.com. It's in classroom too. Make sure you send some information to me, and let me know if this is what you want. Now, if I don't get any communication, this is all forgotten anyway. Believe it or not, I've been trying to set this up with some groups of students for a while. With many master level students, this has been impossible, okay? Impossible for me to do any of this with them. Everybody says that they're busy. Everybody says that they have something better to do. But when they want to publish, then they don't know what to do, and they're blaming everybody for not knowing what they need to know. Sometimes you need to sacrifice a bit of that free time in order to accomplish certain goals. So that is why I'm proposing this in this event. Well, there's some advantages if you already work at the Universidad de Panama. But if you're not there, there are things you can start doing, and you're moving in that direction. At least you have the motivation, right? We don't have to motivate you. This is important. You know it's important. So whoever is looking for an opportunity, I think this is a very good chance to develop some linkage beyond or some networking beyond what we traditionally do, right? And that this can help in the publication of books, or maybe publishing research papers. Now, the English department has a journal, right? I think I don't remember exactly what the name is. Could you remind me what the name of the journal is? The journal at the English department? If I'm not wrong, it's something like Panalingua, I think. That's the name of a journal. Um, and the problem with journals is that for journals to become successful, they need to have a lot of people behind it. Okay. Probably this way we could be producing at least 2 or 3 articles yearly, every year, to be published at Panalingua. And the purpose of Panalingua is to communicate information concerning what we do. That can take different forms. That can be a scientific paper. That can be an essay paper. So we just need to acquaint ourselves with the minimum requirements for a paper, and go ahead and proceed to publish something in Panalingua. That's, I think, a reasonable and reachable objective, right? Then eventually we could do, a lot more. So, well, this is just saying, because we're not forcing anybody. We're not coaching anybody to do anything. I'm just proposing, because I think this is the purpose for you being here. You're here because there are certain things that you want to do. And well, I'm proposing here some things that I think would be very beneficial. So Okay, so here we go. I don't know if you have any comment concerning what I just presented from Google Classroom. I'm all ears.
Okay, taking advantage of the silence, even though we are part of the commission that coordinates these academic activities, I think it's a great opportunity you offered, Professor Cardenas. And I was going to talk to you about that later, but I would like to work in this proposal you have offered during this week, during the past sessions, because it will be a great contribution as academics and as well as part of the community of interpreters and translators in Panama. We are official interpreters and translators, and that is just a job. But making research will be a support to make this job more, give more quality to our job.
Okay. Yes, of course. I think um, we need to change the way we work. Everybody is isolated in general, and people look at all this like competition. It's always a good idea to have some space where you could share and probably do some other work that is not so lonely, because working on your own has some advantages, but most of them are disadvantages. Really, you need to work with other people in order to go for more ambitious goals. One of the reasons why it has become so hard for people to compete for funding, by that I mean monies offered, is because people don't want to work with anybody. They just want to do their own thing. Uh, I see that, among people studying for the masters. I know in some other programs, pretty much the same. We have to learn other ways of performing our academic work if we want to progress and protect ourselves and project a more positive image. An academic is kind of a loner. That's the way our image is projected. It's a loner. And it's because people work on their own, period. End of the story. So if you're going to worry about something, we need to worry about the work that we produce, not so much about other people's work. So those who are ready to contribute and those who are interested in learning more beyond what is traditionally done or accomplished, we could create some liaison, some kind of an alliance in order to present some more work and aspire to win some funding. Because winning funds on your own, that's hard. That's a harder thing to do because one person doesn't have probably the time. Essentially, the problem is time. Everybody's busy, I understand that, but sometimes to accomplish important goals, you need to sacrifice a bit of that time. Okay, so if there aren't any other comments, then it's time for us to move on into the contents that we were working. So yes, if somebody wants to say something, you just go ahead, please.
I was about to ask about the lines. Once we have a group, then we get in contact with you or just announce, tell you that we are interested. We are
Yeah, the first step, sure. The first step is for you to confirm to me that you are really willing to commit into something like this. Okay? That's the first thing. Let's talk first, and then well, I'll tell you what that involves, and then we'll proceed. But first of all, we need
Okay.
to talk. Otherwise, and we need to talk
Mhm.
outside the seminar or outside the certificate program for us to, make up our minds about what is possible and what is not possible.
Right.
Essentially, whoever wants to do this, you have to be willing to open your hand. Okay, we cannot
Mhm.
approach anything like this, which is a society with in doubt or not feeling like you want to share or with this strange ethics or ideas. We need to talk first and see if we are willing to commit into something like this. This
Right.
is
Oh,
something
perfect.
volunteer, so you have to make sure you agree, right? I've
Exactly.
tried to
Okay.
do this before. This is not the first time I attempt to do this. And many people, they just don't want to do any work that is not necessary. That's the problem. Sometimes a lot of this effort is additional effort that you need to do, to commit to do. So uh, we don't accomplish much, or people don't accomplish more because they just don't want to commit. I think that's part of the thing. So first comes a
Right.
conversation.
Exactly. Okay, we will get to you. Thank you very
Mhm. So let me just confirm I have the volume up, so I can hardly listen. So do you hear me fine? Is my audio okay?
It is. I do hear you clearly, sound and clear.
Well, your audio to me is perfect,
Oh,
loud and clear.
all right. Thank you. Thank you. Just okay. Just wanted to verify. Thanks. Okay. Um, Today, Friday, our last day, we're gonna be dealing with something very important. I think everything is important, but some things are of a greater importance. Uh, Many people go ahead and do translation without having any uh, to-do list, and having a to-do list is being very, very diligent and doing our best effort for translation sake. So there are phases suggested for the translation process. We don't have to improvise anything. We're supposed to follow some procedures. So it's important here to bear in mind the following. Translations should not be undertaken in a haphazard fashion, like simply plowing ahead and working directly from the source text to a final product. A careful and systematic approach pays considerable dividends in producing a professional and polished translation. Some people work based on how they feel concerning the work that they have in front of them. But as a matter of fact, professional translation work has some suggestions, right, for effectiveness and proper development of a task, of a translation task. So this has been based on a translation pedagogy and based on steps that a translator should follow to get himself or herself organized. So this is one of the books that I posted in Google Classroom. Robert Bly's The 8 Stages of Translation. This one describes procedures essentially. It's a procedural book that explains how do you tackle certain tasks which are pretty challenging, such as, for instance, translating poetry or anything literary for the same purposes, a challenging activity. So Robert Bly is a very interesting author, and he provides one of the few who provides some pedagogical information on how to proceed with translation. So the first stage or phase is preparation. This involves deciding what the translation task involves and who it is for, right? A quick scan of the material can alert the translator that this is beyond his or her capabilities, or that the time allotted is inadequate. It is also useful to define what type of material is involved, okay? Is it literary, technical, descriptive, informational, or communicative? Any special dictionaries, glossary, or other material should be requested. It might also be helpful to identify colleagues who might be able to offer assistance. The prime reader should be defined in terms of register and vocabulary that the target language translation must use. This initial examination is for you to accept or reject the project. You are entitled to that. If someone offers you a document that you cannot read because it's blurry, partially deleted, or you know, some messed up type of text, you are free to say no, and you should say no. This is the most ethical thing. Unless you convene to fix the document, the original, and you'll charge extra for this work, right? Many people don't like any of this, so you don't do work that you don't feel is well presented, really, okay? Because whoever is willing to pay for your work, they should know what they want. We're all adults. People should know what they want. If they don't know what they want and they don't know what they have in their hands, why should you worry about it? Okay, because this is none of your business, really. It's your business. Meanwhile, or as you proceed and you translate, just for that, and also you derive some legal implication or legal involvement if there is um, anything legal involved, like maybe a deed, uh, proof of life, or certificates of any kind, or maybe evidence of some sort, transcripts and this kind of thing. That is why we have to be faithful and as uh, you know ethical as we can. Sometimes you're gonna run into the unexpected here. So this is the preparation part. So probably this is something over your head. Don't do it. Okay. Especially if it is interpretation, you have to be careful with that. Phase two, you have the initial close reading, right? Text should be read carefully and completely, right? Several times, make sure you understand it fully. It is pointless and professionally damaging to attempt to translate something if you have problems understanding it in the source language beyond an occasional few words. So if what they're giving you is gibberish, then you have to tell them, okay, I will not do this for any money, because this is so convoluted, so cumbersome, so confusing that I cannot deal with it, right? Uh, you should still be able to turn down the job at this point. Also, time is another factor. As you're reading here, if you don't have the time available, and that requires commitment for you to work around the clock, you shouldn't take that kind of work, because as you know, for translation's sake, people say, I need this translated for yesterday. That you don't take that. Okay, don't take that from anybody, because they want professional work, but they want it like in a rush, and they are not paying enough for this kind of service. If they want to do it, they should do it themselves. That's the reality. So okay, you should also make sure that the copy is legible, that no pages are missing, and they're numbered to avoid confusion. Communicate with the author or client, clarify doubts at this stage. If the person doesn't answer your call, or he or she doesn't reply, then you should, immediately abandon boat, really, because that's not the point. They are the ones who need this, not the translator. what you're doing is you are helping them carry some burden, really. So your close reading of a text should include an analysis of deep meaning and style. Okay. If there are untranslatables like idioms, metaphors, and you have to be careful with that. The research, okay. Unless the text is simple, you need to have do some research before starting the translation. This includes reading relevant background material, checking unfamiliar words, finding available translation or similar. Okay. If the subject is technical, you might want to review some publications on the subject in both languages and translations and these kinds of things. Okay. So you need to rewrite difficult portions. This is possible. So rewriting is a good way of ensuring that you really understand the deep meaning of a source language text. You could, suggest this for them to do it if they're capable of doing that. If they can't, then you can propose your rewriting, but that has to come at an additional cost, really. Translation into a first draft. So the heart of the process is when you tap into the deep meaning, okay, you will discover what you will do with that and translates the sections. Then you will translate the whole document and you will generate a first draft, right? That's the idea behind all this. This is for your eyes only at this point. Now, second and subsequent drafts probably are for other pairs of eyes to look at. Reading the translation aloud or to another person may be helpful here. Watch for the information load. Is it too dense or heavy? Too puffed and verbose with little meaning? So if you have someone willing, have the person take a look at your renderings or listen to your renderings. Editing and the final draft. Okay, here is, in writing, but we're going to do the grammar check and the spell check. And we read here that translations for publication frequently are done in camera ready mode or form with no typographic errors or other irregularities so that they can be photographed or photocopied for direct use in publication. So watch out for notes and things which are additional in case this is a material that's going to be published somewhere. The final check is doing final rundown of everything for a document. There's going to be a notarized or certified. Well, you will certify as traditionally. I certify that this translation was done to the best of my ability, right? I keep a copy of the translation for your own protection should it get lost or challenged or whatever. And you are going to keep some information out of sight. But the idea here is that you're going to have some kind of a disclaimer for your final check, right? This is a bona fide translation coming from the original document supplied by my client, and all of that comes in a disclaimer that you did this to the best of your ability, right? It's a faithful translation. Okay, I'd like to know if you have any comment concerning the different phases for translation work. Now, if you want to read a little more, this book is there in Classroom. Oops. I know we have all heard about these steps, right? But the original source of all these stages for translation, the procedure, is original from this author, Robert Bly. He's the one who framed this. Of course, a long time ago. but this has become long established because of his contribution in the field. I don't know if you have maybe some experience you'd like to talk about concerning following steps or preparation for translation. Just like we were saying in week one, we learn from theory, we learn from practice, but we learn more from mistakes, and mistakes translates to experience. So your experiences and whatever you have gone through is very, very good to discuss. If you have any story, that'll be very useful. At least to enlighten those who have very little experience doing this kind of work. Okay, I have a question for you then. So, how many of you have interpreted for someone? What was that experience like? How did you prepare for interpretation, for example?
Well, in my case, interpretation only when I work with the language line, and I had to render interpretations for people accessing to the line uh, to help them actually understand the other party.
Anybody else? Very often for interpretation, like I told you before, you will run into some people, especially if they um, are visitors in our country. Here, local visitors, academic staff or faculty, researchers, that they are unwilling to share their conferences. They are unwilling to share those conferences with whoever is going to assist them with interpretation. Uh, this is, something that I just don't understand why they behave in such a way, right? Because this affects their own work, really. This is going to affect their presentation. If someone interpreting for you doesn't have any clue about what it is that you're talking about exactly in detail, as like for example the presentations, the slides that you're going to present, uh, there's going to be a gap over there. It's a required gap, or not an accident. It's something caused by their own unwillingness to cooperate with the interpreter. So should you interpret for someone like this, I strongly recommend you not to do it. Okay. Very often, uh, some people will come to you and ask you for some interpretation, but they don't want to share the information. Then don't interpret for them. Tell them no, because they have to change that attitude. That's the wrong attitude. That's the wrong attitude. That's the way I see it. So there are some people that we should work for, and others that we shouldn't work for. So if a person doesn't want to help you out complete these phases, um, at a minimum for interpretation, especially because it's so challenging, they just don't understand what they're doing, and they're not supposed to be doing any of that work really. And now many people are doing this online like we're doing here, and they expect someone to, step in and help them out. Don't do it. They don't understand. They really don't know what they're doing, really. That's what they're telling you with that attitude, really. So disrespectful. So, okay, cognates. Okay, we're going to go back to cognates. All right, take a look. We have here parientes. That's a false cognate, relatives, right? But it means really is relatives. But then you should not use parientes to mean parents. Instead, we use padres, right? So we have a partial false cognate here, participar. That's to be involved in something. That's okay. It can also be share something like news or an invitation, right? That's a possible use for this word. We have particular. That's not the same as demanding. Instead of exigente is a better term. Equals a private. Private es un automóvil particular. It's a private car. Perfeccionar is to make perfect. Partial false cognate means to improve or increase professional qualifications or training. Perfeccionó su inglés. That's to perfect or perfeccionar. Okay. So, for example, here we have at the university una dirección de perfeccionamiento. So, this is a fancy name, a very fancy name because it's very difficult to translate. That this is something else. There is no perfeccionamiento. Now they eventually have altered, used other terms. Now we have ongoing education or continuing education or other terms that serve a better purpose than perfeccionamiento, okay? Because there is no perfecting anything. It's like out of the question, and it's beyond reasonable terms, right? To perfect anything like that through education. So we're always learning. Personero is a false cognate, right? That it's not a person. Instead, we use a persona. Personero is a spokesperson's mouthpiece. El personero o portavoz de la Casa Blanca, right? Spokesperson, right? Mouthpiece is not as common anymore. More of a spokesperson. Um, because I think it's the role is very well described there, spokesperson. So we have perspectiva, for example, it's a partial false cognate. It's perspective in drawing and architecture. That's related to sketching something. It's also viewpoint and prospects for the future. That's a perspective. Petulancia is a false cognate that doesn't mean petulance of in the sense of irritable or impatient. Okay. Petulancia is more like, impertinencia. So it's more like insolente, vanity, okay, vanity, insolence. Plantear is not plant. It's to raise an issue, pose a problem, theory, or postulate, right? That's more like that. Some more proverbs and idioms are necessary for us to bring in. Ni a tiros, not for anything. Okay, that's like something that you're unwilling, right, to do, not for anything. Ni mucho menos, far from it, far from it. No cabe duda. There is no doubt. There is no doubt. No darse por entendido, to pretend not to understand. To pretend not to understand. No dejar piedra por mover, to leave no stone unturned, right? No es oro todo lo que reluce, all that glitters is not gold. No es tan fiero el león como lo pintan. His bark is worse than his bite. His bark is worse than his bite. No hay de qué. Don't mention it. Don't mention it. No hay mal que por bien no venga. Every cloud has a silver lining. This is a good one. This is like, more positive thinking oriented than anything. It's a very common one. and very useful to remember. Every cloud has a silver lining. Okay. No me importa un comino. I don't give a damn. Register is rather low over here, right? It's rather low. Because this is almost vulgar, almost. Okay. Now, we need to talk a little bit about interpretation, right? Interpretation, because as I was telling you, chances are sometimes you have to translate. Some of the times they expect you to interpret. If you have to interpret, you do your best every time. It's not always an easy thing to do, but that's a source of income for so many people. Okay, that they need this kind of services. And there is some impact coming from linguistics and communications theory into these matters, right? So contemporary approaches to translation and interpretation have been profoundly influenced by the science of linguistics and communications theory. Earlier approaches, up to the first few decades of the 20th century, had been grounded in pragmatic view with little, if any, theoretical foundation. Okay, so that is why lots of translators are empirical, right? Because most of it comes from the being involved in the craft of translating. But then now a body of knowledge and theory has been developed on better practices. As we have established here, we learn something from theory, a little more from practice. And most of the learning, of course, comes from making mistakes, which is experience. This is why things have been empirical up to a certain point. But now, at present, a good translator is also a professional who knows theory, who knows what is good and what is not good, right? What theory existed consisted of arbitrary rules for translation, okay, and the offerings of some literature or philology. This is what transpired at the beginning of the 20th century. There wasn't much of the theory as there is today. So the contributions made by early 20th century linguists, especially those of the structural field, have increasingly suggested the emergence of a linguistic science which can make meaningful theoretical contributions to translation. So if you know some theory, this is good because you will know what to do given X problem. The problem with being empirical is that you're gonna go you're gonna play the guitar by the ear, and this is not the idea. The idea is that you are gonna come up with some effective solution, something useful that's probably grounded on some literature. That's the point. The work of Ferdinand de Saussure and the linguistic circles of Copenhagen and Prague and a number of American linguists strengthened the argument that the theoretical foundations for translation as a science can be found. Semantics, semiotics, and anthropology supported this position also. Okay, so there is a lot of theory that now links to general linguistics. So the science of linking language and culture has also permitted the anthropologists to suggest approaches to the translator or interpreter. The writings in recent years have given rise to the field called translation studies or translatology, which is not as common, but more like translation studies. The field of communication has also weighed in, arguing that language can be discussed in terms of communication concepts such as transmitters, receivers, channel, information load, redundancy, noise, etc. We were talking about this during week number 2, I think, that there is this weaving of theory between linguistics and communication theory. This focus has an obvious uh, lead into computer applications and to the dream of machine translation, or at least machine aided, using advanced computers. The debate on translation thus has come to be framed in terms of whether if it is an art, like we do with poetry, right? And some other very creative translation work, or a craft, pragmatic, that is based more on experience and general to-do criteria and things to do, to follow, or a science that's more grounded in theory. So there are some extreme positions, right? So there are three possibilities: being an art, being a craft, being a science. Many argue that translation is in fact all three, and the emphasis on art, craft, or science depends on the particular type of material being translated, the personal approach of the translator, and the needs of the prime reader to receive, who will receive the end product. So perhaps the appropriate parallel to the relationship between linguistic theory and translation is that of physics and engineering, or mechanics and architecture. Okay, so one is probably more specialized than the other, and you will resort to one field depending on what you want to accomplish. So the practitioner ignores theory at his or her peril, but the theoretical and scientific foundations alone cannot make a good translation. Cannot make a good translation. There's a misplace of a verb there. So Octavio Paz explains that no hay ni puede haber una ciencia de la traducción, aunque esta puede y debe estudiarse científicamente. Some people think this is not necessary. All you need is experience and, good command of languages and things like that. But the reality is that you're not a professional person if you only know that. You need some background information, or you will be not enough. You're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. So the 20th century emphasis on a linguistic science as a foundation for translation has also led to a separation between the study of translation and interpretation. Increasingly, there has been an awareness that the mechanism by which the brain processes written and spoken language are different. And there is the switching mechanism that allows transference from one language to another. It's not the same in written and spoken language. You know that an interpreter has to be more versatile. Rendering has to, come out almost automatically. A person needs to have an extremely native-like type of command, extremely effective command of language structure and language, in order to be able to perform. And this is an ability that I think is something that people develop, not something that you inherit or you're born this way. You train in order to become an interpreter. But these are short-lived abilities, because generally when people go into interpretation, they need to work with someone in tandem, so as to when one of them gets tired, the other one takes over and goes in. And it's very hard and very demanding, so you shouldn't attempt to interpret all by yourself, because if you get tired, then no one's going to be there to assist you. You need some assistance for this. And this makes interpretation expensive also. So this has implications for the teaching of translation versus interpretation, since one of the apparent findings is that to be a successful interpreter, one must have the interpreting switching mechanism developed at a very early age, generally through process of growing exposed to two languages. Okay, as it seems, it's a skill, right? It's a skill. I just don't believe in anything being so natural. Anybody may train themselves into some craft and develop a skill set. Practice makes perfect, really. So, yeah. Now, if the switching mechanism for interpretation is not so developed, it's very difficult to acquire as an adolescent or adult. The conclusion may well be that it is extremely difficult, if not impossible, to teach simultaneous interpretation to someone without this switching mechanism in place. This is an assumption I disagree with. One of the branches of translation studies is conference interpretation, conference interpreting. And this is studied at a master's level. Generally, it involves languages A, B, and C. We need these kinds of professionals in our country. We don't have as many as the country needs. And there is a market, a profitable market for this kind of professional. So if someone is interested in probably, make a living out of interpreting, this is a means, gaining access to training in this direction. Okay. Successful translation teaching, on the other hand, relies on being able to express oneself effectively in our target language, then acquiring some other elements for communication in writing, the grammar, the lexical aspects, and semantics and stylistics, and so forth. The process is possible, and they think, well, in this source, the idea is that interpretation is extremely challenging. Of course, it will always be extremely challenging, but whoever is able to translate should also be able to interpret. Maybe not as effectively as they can translate, but they at least will do the job to some extent. Also, it's important to have in mind that a good author should speak more than one language if they want to be good professionals, right? So it's the authors or the speakers or the guest speakers or whoever that is going to be delivering a conference, that they need to surpass their own limitations because they need to learn at least a second language. Okay? What about Duff's material on a third language? What is this? So Alan Duff, in his book, The Third Language, which is in Classroom, lays out an interesting idea which has value both for theory and practice of translation. This is what some people call like the ideal topic for research in translation. Very, very important topic. And well, let's find out what this is. According to Duff, he explains that a lot of the material that is being translated does not sound quite natural. Okay, does not sound natural. And he suggests that the basic reason is that all too many translators write in a third language that is somewhere between the source language and the target language. So why does this occur? Why does this happen? Although the problem is one that affects mainly translators working out of their native tongue. Okay, so if you're translating into English, chances are that you're going to write in English, but it's not going to be a English, like 100% English. This is going to be your brain's version of what English language is, right? Not English. And it's a proven fact that people will read something translated and then it's not clear. It's not 100% English. Duff argues that the phenomenon is observable in translators writing into their mother tongue, right? So that the explanation goes deeper than the simple inability to write clearly in the target language. So it also happens when people write into their very own mother tongue. So the process of translation creates some I don't know, additional language, which is a mixture of the two languages you are dealing with, and you're going to render your translation into this like interlanguage, form. It is easy enough to remember that any number of blatant examples of bad translations which may use the words of the target language were written by someone who's not familiar enough with the target language to sound natural. Duff's examples explain that many native speakers writing in their mother tongue are somehow unable to break totally away from the word syntax and style of the source language, and thus sound unnatural in their target language. For the sake of simplicity, he uses some examples of translations into English, but his basic arguments are valid in other languages also. The problem is the inappropriate use of words or choice of words, and this has to do with syntax and style also. The problem he notes goes beyond the dictionaries, because the dictionary is just concerned with words, not with how words are put together. So the phrasing is not natural. The phrasing is in a middle language that involves Spanish and English. In a typical third language translation, the words are all in English, no spelling or grammar mistakes, but it still sounds foreign because of the way words are put together in the sentences, because they're combined in unfamiliar, strange ways. Okay, here we have an example. General operation precautions. So do not put the power tool and accessories in work beyond their abilities. Keep unauthorized people, especially children, away from the power tool. So why does this read like a translation and not natural English? Some of the features which place in Duff's third language include that one does not speak of putting a tool in work. Okay, this is confusing, and a tool does not have an ability. Take a look. The word unauthorized is inappropriate in a home situation, which is where the power tool was designed to be. So how can we move this example from the third language into English? And a possible solution comes here. So look again, like do not put the power tool and accessories in work beyond their abilities. Okay? That one becomes do not overload the power tool. Okay? Instead of keep unauthorized people, especially children, away from the power tool, becomes keep the power tool away from children and anyone not familiar with how to operate it. In his book, Dove examines the third language in three categories: lexical problems, structural problems, and difficulties with style and transference from one culture to another. To pick up one single aspect of his first category, we note how a mix of register can make the sentence sound unnatural. He provides three examples here. Just take a look at this in more detail. All right. So the architects and engineers had quite a lot of trouble with these columns before the desired optical effect was achieved. The thing was that in spite of the raised pattern, the concrete rods could be seen through the glass. So the overall register of this passage is formal and technical. It's a description of an aspect of architecture, building, construction. But there are two jarring notes, two short clauses which are in lower register. Quite a lot, and the thing was. Okay. So it is a serious thing, because I think register is what probably gets this off track, and very seriously. That quite a lot on the thing is very general and non-specific. Here we have another example from a Brazilian trade advertisement in the British newspaper. So, but at present, iron ore, manganese, maize, tool machinery, male and female and children fashion products, shoes, cars, and lorries, airplanes and ships are components of Brazilian exports. So here the overall register of a commercial advertisement contains some inappropriate words. Male and female, more appropriate to an anthropological report. And component, more suited to scientific study, right? A more balanced register would probably begin with Brazilian exports include, and speak of clothing for men, women, and children. So some words, believe it or not, affect the overall message. So we have male and female, same as in component, the word component. So here we go. Register may ruin some translation work, and not because I say so, it's because the raters and the people who would evaluate the work that we do will pay attention to some detail, and they want the message to be, I don't know, framed or phrased appropriately. So also the mixing of metaphors creates sense of the third language. So an example here is the situation opened a wedge between the intellectual and the masses. A wound, in the case of Argentina, at least healed poorly and late. So analyzing this metaphor, the basic element describes the gap between intellectuals and the masses. But two metaphors are used and makes to characterize that gap. First, that there is a wedge between being driven, between them, and second, that it is a wound. So what they mean is these terms make the translation foreign. And this is more style than anything. So the choice of a metaphor also plays a role. It's important to use a metaphor that is effective, that is good, that functions, that is something functional, not to say or include whatever we want to include, right? So that's the thing. So Dove provides a fresh look at the recurring problem of translation that seem adequate but do not sound natural, right? Translations that seem adequate but do not sound natural. His concept that this is due to a third language is a useful one that should lead us to examine our own translation, see if this indeed is a language we're using as our target language. Okay. This is a very unfair activity, translation, because you make mistakes. Well, you get some recognition, but in reality, people are assessing your work and they're trying to find your mistakes, right? That's what they're doing. And sometimes they know languages as well as the translator or as well as the interpreter. They know it, but they're not there to help you. They're there to criticize what you're doing. Okay, very good. Okay, let me just check out time. Okay, it's already 9:30. I'd like to have a brief break here, 10 minutes, and then we'll be back in 10. How about that, Professor Marisol
That
or Professor Suri?
it is 9:31. So that will be at 9:41. Let's make it
Oh,
45, okay?
okay, up to the 45.
Yes.
All
Okay.
right.
So we're in a break now. Go ahead and grab your coffee.
in classroom. It's entitled, it's a chapter or unit entitled "Who Reads It Anyway?" We overlook that the mission of a translator is also not only to deal with the message, but to respect the audience, to keep in mind the readership, the readership or the person who is uh, the target here. Okay, so who reads it anyway? I'm gonna go straight into the content, and I read here. It goes pretty much as in here. So we cannot, of course, say all we want by pointing and by wrinkling our noses. Okay. Every translator will have wished at times that we could on paper. Unfortunately, the mighty linguistic confusion is not so easily resolved, right? Okay. The first chapter of the book over here is referring to the fountain and the water jar, because he wanted to begin by stressing rather than avoiding the fact that the reader turns to the translation nearly always. Just see if I could probably project this a little better. I got lost here. The projection is not as effective as in showing, fortunately. I will not be able to show much of this. Okay, it's out of control here in this Zoom. I
Page
don't control much.
101.
I don't control that much the screen. But the reality is that in this last chapter, and who reads it anyway, his intention, Duff's intention, is to draw attention to a thought that must occasionally disturb the translator. Okay, what is that? Is that what occurs is that it's going away. Yeah. There is a suspicion that the translator prefers to keep out of his mind, suspicion that nobody really bothers about the reading of a translation, or that if it is read with a grudging condescension. It's like a necessary evil rather than a choice. So where does this come from? It comes from a situation in which you know that the translator takes a secondary role. Okay, that's the thing. So unfortunately, I won't be able to read directly, but I'm going to give you the summary of his intention. Is that in history, translators have played a secondary role, and they're more like an assistant to someone who's a creator, some kind of literature or text. The reality is that without translation, it would have been impossible for civilization to move to where we are. We are where we are because of translation. And let me just give you an example. Media in English does not have much impact in a society like ours, for example, which is Spanish speaking audience, because most of what they communicate is for a different audience. It's for another culture altogether. So what the translator or what the interpreter accomplishes is a transference that's, I think, the best there is. Dubbing and subtitling are both important activities. In our countries, in our contexts, those haven't been very, you know, developed really. People don't do much of any of this, but these are so necessary. And as proof of this, you have, for instance, websites like TED Talks TED Talks that they need subtitlers and people who would dub those speeches for them, and they do it as volunteer work. I encourage you to go into some websites where translation or interpretation is needed, or subtitling or dubbing is needed, as a way for you to get exposure to topic variety, because I think that's what will really make someone in translation better than the average. And society doesn't fully give translators and interpreter recognition, but this is a very necessary role, and one that is going to be, I think, limited as people don't really value it, or they don't see the importance. Translators have to fight for their space, or same as interpreters, because everybody wants your skill set or needs your service, but they're unwilling to pay for your service, or they don't want to recognize the importance of the activity that you do. So I think it's very important to have them, find a solution on their own. And still, people are saying that it's not possible for someone who's not a native speaker to interpret or to dub or subtitle. That's not true. Most of the subtitlers and people involved in this kind of interpretation, they're non-native speakers. So this is all a fallacy, that you have to hire native speakers for someone to do this work correctly. As long as people are professional and they have the experience and the desire to work in this industry, they will accomplish the task. Just to bring in an example about something we were discussing before, many places like call centers involved in interpretation, they hire non-native speakers of English to interpret. Sometimes they do it back and forth. Sometimes they interpret into Spanish for American audiences, or they do it whichever way. So as long as the person is competent in a language, they can do that kind of work, So what I would like to stress here is that you need to read these chapters and pay attention to the reality of the translators. Their work is not recognized. They don't want to be paid. They're not protected. Everybody wants them to be a freelancer, but everybody needs translation and interpretation. But they don't want to accept or acknowledge that this is an important role. For example, at Universidad de Panama, just like any other public university that's funded by the government, they want to become international. That's why they are getting accredited, right? Every university has to undergo the CONEAUPA accreditation, but you will seldom find in any of their plans the creation of offices for interpretation and translation, or at least to have a hired supervisor or someone who would perform this kind of work whenever there are visitors at universities. Just to give you an idea, I think last year there were over 30 international visitors at Universidad de Panama, coming from non-Spanish speaking countries. You have people there going in there from places like Bulgaria, Indonesia, visitors from Canada. You name the country, they all get here. And then the authorities at the university, they don't speak. Sometimes they don't even speak English. So how could the university, or any university of ours, project a very positive image if there is no openness and there is no understanding of the importance of having some language policy. Okay. So if you ever have access to any of those potential president of the university candidates, ask them if you could, because I've asked some of them by myself, and they don't include anything like interpretation anywhere. They don't see the point of interpreting anything, and this is a serious concern, because they say they want to be international or internationally accredited, but one of the requirements for accreditation and internationalization of an institution is to speak several languages and be able to create these alliances with international groups and bring staff and faculty and students from other countries into ours and to send ours to their countries. And that is working very slowly. And the reason is the language barrier. Our authorities don't understand the importance of having a language policy. And this is affecting everything. This is slowing down everything. Okay. I hope part of the mission of this certificate program has been to open your eyes to some limitations that we are constrained by, that we're being affected by the absence of policies, of critical thinking, of I don't know, of providing or providing people with the resources they need, right? The Faculty of Humanities could have a long time created a translation department, but they don't do it. They don't do it. And they say that the university needs to grow. But yes, this is a field to grow, but no one cares about it. They don't think it's important, or they don't think it's worth the effort. I don't know if you have any thoughts on this, because our institution is going to be in an election in the coming months. I think in July, there's going to be an election. I don't know if you've heard anything from any candidate concerning translation offices or interpretation, because then we need interpreters. You have visitors from China. I remember last year at the Faculty of Economy, that dean, the dean of the Faculty of Economy, I don't remember his name, yeah, but he required someone who would assist them with a visitor coming from China. This person was to deliver an important conference in English. There wasn't anybody for them, and I sent one of the students from the master's level program, but the person was impossible to reach, really, and they wanted to have the conference anyway. They wanted to have that conference anyway without providing access to the contents of the conference and any of that. So I told the person I recommended for that not to go. I told him, no, don't go. Don't go if they don't answer your call or they don't call you back, and they never called, so the person didn't go there. Okay. Yeah, I've been having some very serious concerns because look, if they want someone to help them out, they shouldn't think that this is going to be automatic. Many people are willing to do this kind of work without any money involved, like volunteer work or ad honorem. But on top of being ad honorem work, they don't want to give you information concerning what conferences are going to be about, or people in our university don't know what the conference is about either. So we're facing two very serious limitations with regarding access to knowledge. Okay, so this is a problem that we have at the university. As a matter of fact, right now I'm writing a paper. This is more of an essay article that I'm going to present. The essay has to do with the absence of conference interpreters at the university, and the number of the sheer number of international visitors attending university events or just visiting to deliver a conference that lack an assistance. There's just a protocolo, some kind of what they call protocolos of like minimum like an MC who would speak in behalf of the president of the university, but this person doesn't know English. And this is a problem. This is creating a crisis that has to do with communication. I'm writing this essay right now. I'm going to be taking it to a journal, a local one, of course, because it's a local topic. I don't see any proposal in that regard. I don't know if you have an opinion concerning this topic. Maybe you do. If you do, you just go ahead and say something. Or if you have any experience with this, let me know about it or let us know about it. All right. So, so now, well, I hope, we have accomplished the mission of informing you that we have very serious limitations, um, with communication with international organizations and institutions. It's affecting the university, eh, to a large extent. We don't have people who communicate information, and it's assumed that people uh, don't need to know many things, and I don't think that's very democratic. I think it's important to uh, inform everybody about everything, and one way to do it is to set up an office that has to do with translation and interpretation at the university. This is necessary. So, okay. I'm now going to deal a little bit with the numbers and measurements because I think it's a relevant topic too. It's a problem that translators and interpreters face, and it deserves our attention in order to avoid mistakes, unnecessary mistakes. So, the Spanish English translator will find a few idiosyncrasies, meaning by idiosyncrasies, um, rather um, out of the ordinary, right? Arrangements of words or organization of numbers, and measurements which may cause problems. Regarding numbers, the English usage regarding commas and periods indicate decimals and separate three-digit clusters. In large numbers, it's reversed in most Spanish-speaking countries. In English, you say P equals pi equals 3.1416, and then you have semicolon 1, comma 235, comma 600 inhabitants. In Spanish, then you don't have periods there. You have them in the larger numbers, but you do have them, the commas in Spanish, coming within the first set. So you have the first set in Spanish gets a comma, first set in English gets a period, and then when you have a larger number like 1,235,600, then you have a bunch of commas occurring in English. That's a convention. Whereas in Spanish, they suggest placing periods after each one of the different number groups or number families. So it's worth the effort of paying attention to what conventions are followed. So what I'm presenting here is what General Translation reports. These are the way things are set up. In English, for a number like a pi, you have a period, right? In Spanish, you have a comma. But when you have a larger number that is all written out or all, put there without any abbreviation, what you need is commas in English and then periods in Spanish. Also, it's a very serious thing when we talk about billions in the US. So a billion, it's 1,000 million. 1,000 million, that's a billion. Okay, however, in Latin America, Europe, and much of the rest of the world, billion means million. What the Spaniards refer to as a millardo. Okay, I think. So it's a million. Right? The correct translation for the US billion in the Spanish usage would be mil millones. Okay. And the correct translation from Spanish billón to English would be trillion, trillones. I don't know if you have any comment concerning this or any experience concerning this topic on numbers. Now, this information may not be very common, but we have to avoid making mistakes. So it's a useful thing to bear in mind that in English or from English to Spanish and other European languages, what a billion is 1,000 million. Okay, 1,000 million. Mil millones, that's a billion. Un billón. Okay, that's what stands for from English, from the English perspective. Mil millones, okay? That's a billion. But then if you're coming from Spanish into English and you're referring to something like that, then that's a million. And billion in Spanish usage will be el billón, is trillion. Okay. Now, scientific notation helps deal with these numbers. With mathematics, when you're referring to something technical concerning distances out there in the space, right? Because measurements in either in the space or in microscopic matters, of course, require special measurements because of the minimal numbers and because of the extreme numbers that are usually dealt with. So this is important to bear in mind. Once more, I'm going to go ahead and repeat this. Coming from English into Spanish, you say a billion, that's 1,000,000,000. That's what it means. Mil millones. But coming from Spanish into English, and you refer to beyond, this is what is going to be translated as a trillion.
Uh, well, comment that I could make for this, it would be that in regard, it's in the decimal. English and Spanish are, but I do not observe now for these with this presentation that there is also a numerical difference because of the amount of zeros in each. So it indicates like probably Spanish had a larger number. In English, it doesn't. It does not represent the same amount. I don't know. I may be wrong. Can you explain?
Yeah, chances are, since going from English to Spanish, for example, there will be fewer zeros. But of course, going from Spanish to English, there will be larger zeros. And there isn't much we can do about this. This is the way it is presented. So when you say billions in English, what you're really referring to is trillions in English. So billones in Spanish is trillions in English, and um, billions is it's a thousand million every time. So bear this in mind as to know what to say when you have to interpret or what to write when you're translating. So if you are dealing with billions in your document, that's 1,000,000,000,000 for them. Fewer numbers. As you see, fewer zeros, I mean. There are 9 zeros. 9 zeros, that's 1 billion. Whereas if you're referring to beyond in Spanish, or so that's like, look at how many zeros. You have 12. 12 of them. 12 zeros. And that's translated in English as trillion. So there is a gap here, a very serious source of misunderstanding, I think, and a potential source of trouble for a translator here. It's important to double check and ask a person if they're going to be presenting some large number like this ones to confirm what they mean.
Another thing that is also difficult to understand is when they use only, especially in the maybe news, on the news, that they use they don't put the complete number. They just used like they say 1.5 million or trillion or billion or whatever whatever name for that, and that's really confusing all the time. It's confusing for me. As I see this right now, it's confusing.
Yeah, indeed it is. And there is a discrepancy in terms of the amounts. Because if
Yeah,
they're counting kilometers, or they're counting money or dollars, something. So this information matters. But this is like a very specific topic that translators need to verify uh, and ask whoever it is that's the author or the one delivering some figures or whatever,
to
just to get that.
mathematicians.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you need to get informed with someone. but obviously there is a discrepancy, because if you're going and you're talking about billones in Spanish, that's going to become trillions in English. And well, so when they say trillions, then that means some other number in Spanish, obviously. So this is very serious, I think. And this is out of our control as translators, because we don't set up any of these systems.
Is this
that
information in any of the books that you have recommended or that you shared?
I have read about it in several books. If you're interested, I could probably post later another one that has to do with the numbers, because this is more scientific than anything, and technical translation is scientific translation. Actually, I have with me here in my room, with me one that I am reading right now. This is Scientific and Technical Translation Explained by Jody Byrne. It's a Routledge book. The nuts and bolts for beginners. That's what they say. Let me just see probably in the table of contents here, they have something concerning the numbers. If I find it very quickly, I'll send it to you. Yeah, here it is. On page 202, there is an appendix, scientific notation and units of measure. Let me get that. Page 202. Yeah, they have a table. They have a table here for some prefixes here. Depending on the amounts, if they're very large or very small. So but they're only presenting it in English. They don't present that very much in Spanish. What they tell you is that you have number 10 as the base. If it is exponentially presented at the 24th power, that's like septillion or quadrillion. And the trillion is 10 at the 12th exponent. That's what they call the tera. And in a short scale, that's trillion. In a long scale, that's a billion. And they have two possible names for that. So this is serious. So what I can do is send you the table they present here as for us to understand it, because I think in English they have it one way. And they have a note here, say long scale and short scale are used here to refer to alternative systems used in countries such as the UK and USA. This is particularly apparent with regard to the different definitions of the term billion. So billion is a serious problem because it means one thing for Europeans, and it means something else for Americans. So if you're interested, maybe I can post this in Google Classroom when we're done. I'll take a photo and post it over there. Okay, that way we could have some additional reference. Yes, because I know in technical translation, you're gonna run into all kinds of difficulties. This is one of those. This is one of those. This is one of those. Absolutely. So yeah, let's take a look here. For example, because this is a topic that deserves some attention. So you have in English million, and this Spanish millón. Okay, so it's pretty much the same. So things start getting a little complicated when you have more than 6 zeros. You have 9 zeros. In English, it's a billion. And in Spanish, it's mil millones. Coming from English. But then when you have 12 zeros, in English, that's a trillion. And then in Spanish, it becomes billón. Okay.
The one that I identify that I know it's then in English, not in Spanish. Mil millones. That's also confusing. I always thought that was what is a billion. I use billion, but not mil millones. In that way, it's more practical to use billion. But then the last example, yeah, that one is then it's confusing in both languages.
Yes. What I think that it isn't for what I see, it's in round numbers. When we get to the need to round up a number, then it comes the difference. For example, we have 999,000 millions, and then it turned into 1,000 million. So maybe rounding up the numbers had a difference. Here's where there is like a trick. Probably they're using scales that determine these differences. I don't know. That's it's a guess. I will need to verify.
Yeah, but I think that in English it's less confusing than in Spanish because they have a difference between, yeah, they have million, they have billions and trillion.
But for the sake of translation, it's very important because we can make a mistake in numbers, and that's a fact.
Thank God we don't have those, no, we don't use those numbers. We don't have that amount of money.
Yeah, so this is challenging. I strongly recommend you to take a look. I'm gonna post the table I have from this book by Jody Byrne on scientific and technical translation explained, because I think it's worth looking at that so as to have a criteria. I think we have to go by the number of zeros. So if a number has 9 zeros, then it's a billion. And for Spanish, mil millones. If it has 12 zeros, it's a trillion in English, right? And then they say it's a trillón. Now, I've also seen the word millardo. I don't know if that is a word you're familiar with. Millardo. So what do you have millardo that, what does that stand for? Millardo.
To me, it would indicate millions. It's a way. But it is a mathematical thing because that amount of zeros, it's la potenciación. And so it has to do, there is something there. And for the sake of translation, we have to check what is the difference and why. What would be the number and how to translate it.
Yeah, but remember, if you're dealing with a text that includes these kinds of figures, and this doesn't make sense to you, I think we shouldn't translate that because chances are it's going to be confusing. And because you'll have to go from English into Spanish generally, right? You're going to be translating something in English into Spanish. You'll have to make yourself clear. And someone's going to come up with some kind of correction, probably. So this
Right.
is the kind, it's like a time bomb for a translator.
Right. For example, it happens when we are translating. The difference comes when we are translating a document in English to Spanish, and then we have to use the correct number translation or equivalent for the number, for the amount, which it's a different thing in Spanish, but we are rendering it from English, and that's the case. It is the contrary, or I think it would pose no more not a big problem when it is from Spanish to English. Uh, Probably that's another thing to be verified.
So, also, this is another issue that, you know, is it appears because of the mistakes that people make as they translate. Sometimes you'll have to translate something that is handwritten, right? So you have something, and you're gonna have the number one and number seven, and those two could be confused. Um, Especially the English seven with the Spanish one, because they're written almost the same. Spanish avoids the confusion by crossing the seven. You know, when you go to the bank, this is one of the reasons I write a seven when you're drafting maybe some of those receipts, or you're drawing your check, or you're writing your in a check on a check you're writing your ID, and if there is a number seven in your ID, you need to you need to cross the seven to make sure people know what seven that is. But in English, that crossing is not as common. Yeah, it's not common in the US. So you write the seven without crossing it in banks and in reports, in homework, in any in books. Fortunately, most translators work from typed texts, okay, especially when dealing with figures. And in typed text, the numbers are identical in both languages. The problem comes when the writing, there is handwritten material, someone's notes or something like that, maybe some addition on the side, and they don't cross the seven, then you're going to be you have to be very careful, because seven and one, for some reason, tend to be confused. I don't know, probably you've had that experience. Maybe you have. I'd like to know if you've ever experienced any confusion like this.
Yes, it is, because number one and number seven, they can look alike, especially in some handwritten forms. People, and especially when it is in checks and some kind of where we have to pay an amount of money or receive an amount of money, then also. So yes, it has a dash or a crossbar seven to make the difference between one and number seven. Should be better to avoid confusions, as you said there.
So yes, there are all kinds of misunderstandings that occur, and these are typical. One of them, large numbers, like that require like scientific notation. That's a problem. That's a source of problems. Uh, Dealing with numbers, handwritten numbers, it's another problem. Especially if that is coming from English into Spanish, that could be a problem. In English, they don't cross the seven. Seven's not crossed. So measurements. So the United States is one of the very few countries in the world that has resisted conversion to the metric system, and this can create difficulties. And we read here that a unit of measure is symbolic and not intended to be precise. The translation should be into the unit of measure best known to the prime reader. So you need to do a conversion. You need to do a conversion. If you're translating that for an audience in European country, you'll have to use the metric system. Whereas if you're translating into English for an English system country, then you'll do the conversion. And here you see, he was miles from home, a kilometros. He drank many quarts. muchos litros. Okay. But these are special challenges that if you are not someone very knowledgeable of this, and that's why it's so important to read the document in advance. If you don't read, you will not run into the booby traps, right, that are in the document, because you're gonna have some time bombs over there waiting for you, and once you go into them, you'll be probably asking the person like, okay, what is this? And what they want to listen is your work is ready, and they're gonna be asking like, when are you gonna have my translation ready? They don't want to clarify anything with you because this is the way people behave. This is the way clients operate. They don't care if it is good or not. All they care about is that they're paying money and you're gonna give them back their work for yesterday. They just don't care much, really. So it's a serious challenge. And sometimes many translators don't want to call their clients or whoever is requesting translation because they don't want to clarify anything. They want you to tell them your translation is ready. Here it is. So how would you deal with something like this? Well, all we need to know is we need to read the document in advance. So as to discover that there's a lot of numbers in there and tell them, no, I'm sorry, I'm not going to translate this for you because this is going to be difficult to deal with, or you're going to say that I didn't do my job, because we're supposed to do the conversion between the two systems. Do you have any experience dealing with this? Personally, I've had the experience of dealing with some information from Faculty of Medicine and Faculty of Pharmacy. Uh, so the work that I've done for them, I've told them openly, if you're going to bring me all those numbers, you have to do your conversions and you have to provide the notes necessary for me to explain something like that, or uh, to at least provide some translator's note or interpreter's parenthesis on explaining something. Because uh, when you are performing, when you're on stage, so to speak, for performance as an interpretation, the speaker, they're in a hurry always, and they expect you to know what they know. You cannot be in their minds. So you need to find out if they're going to be referring to something that's a percentage or decimal numbers or scientific notation of some sort or conversion. And if they're going to do it that way, then you should let them explain it themselves. And otherwise, people may tend to blame you as the one who did not find out or who was supposed to know. And remember, first of all, there is no way you will know everything. You are not supposed to be an expert in any of those fields, theirs. Right? That's one thing. And the other that you're not supposed to know everything, and you cannot know everything either. There are things that you will not know. Always, there will be things that we won't know. So we have to explain, whoever is asking for assistance on any of this, that you can assist, but to the best of your ability. And sometimes they listen to this and they don't understand it. But if they you see that they expect that you will solve their problem, don't take that blame. You're not be blamed for work that is not very clear, right? It's an issue. Okay.
Yes, Professor. And this situation is like related to what we were talking during this week. The context is very important. Otherwise, and we need as translators, we need like study like and give the extra mile, as we were saying too, because it's we need to understand the context. For example, with the numbers, and I didn't have any so much experience in translating, but the measurements change according to the countries and the situations. So it's true that uh, we cannot, we cannot, it's impossible to know everything, right? As you were saying. And we really need to study. It's an issue of studying really, uh, trying to get more in depth into the situation or into the text we need to translate.
Right, right. And then you shouldn't take the blame, because the problem is it's not only what the audience gets. They come to be under the impression that you made a mistake. They of course they will not blame the speaker in the original language. They're gonna think that you are mistranslating or misinterpreting something, and then you need to talk this over. And if they're unwilling to help you, then don't assist them. Don't assist them, because it's their attitude that is wrong. Attitude matters very much here. Remember, it's their activity. You're just there to assist. Sometimes they expect you to be an all knowledgeable expert, who's going to solve the problem. No, you're not there to solve their problem. You're there to assist what they are saying. So it's something serious, because that affects the translator or interpreter's image. And if you're pending for payment, probably they're going to be coming up with, okay, that day, X day, or maybe on Wednesday, you misinterpreted this and this numbers, and that created a confusion in the audience, and people were asking about it. And if you could clarify, I'm not going to clarify anything for you. You are the one, you as a speaker, you are the one who's responsible for being mindful that you're coming to a country like Panama, for example, where you have a different system, or the English system and the metric system are both in place. So you have to provide equivalences for both, so that people feel comfortable with your presentation. If you did not do it and you assume that everybody would understand it the way you presented it, don't expect the interpreter or the translator to fix your misunderstanding or limited understanding of the context in which you're delivering. Many times they think they're hiring a a co-author, and you're not a co-author, especially in interpretation work. In translation, probably you do, because you have the time to do research and find out, maybe call someone, not the client. Oh yeah, not the client, because you call the client what they want. You know what they want, right? When's my translation ready? When's my translation ready? That's what they want to hear. They don't want you to ask them questions about things that they wrote, or probably mistakes they made, these kinds of things, because everybody makes mistakes. This is a human condition. So in other cases, especially in commercial, technical, and legal translation, the intent is to give a much more precise measurement. And here the translator has a dilemma. If he or she leaves the measurement in the original source language unit, it may seem strange and incomprehensible to the target language prime reader. Okay, so what does this count? This may count as an omission. And what is an omission? Your mistake as a translator, right? And if you're the interpreter and you repeat exactly what they said and people don't understand it, it's your mistake because you misinterpreted some piece of information. Okay. And remember, they generally give you a conference paper if they ever give it to you the night before. They'll give it to you the night before. So the night before, you were supposed to worry about what it is that they're going to say. So ethically, professionally wise, you could or you should, but for many interpreters and translators, this is just a side job. A side job. You're employed generally on something else, and you provide your assistance or you're hopeful to be useful. But in order to be useful, you have to be informed. And that's why it's so important to read whatever it is that they give you. And if they don't give you anything, please don't walk into that situation because you're going to get hurt. Your image is going to suffer. They're going to end up saying things like, you don't know any English, because this is what happens at the end, especially if you're not a native speaker. We have a lot of native speaker bias in our context. If you're Panamanian and you know English and Spanish, and people think they know English well or as well as you, they are going to probably be checking if your English is good. That's what they're really checking. Okay, this person seems to know English, but he made this and this and this and this mistakes. Okay, so as a professional, you have to be careful concerning this topic because this is going to make you suffer. Your image is going to suffer. They're going to try to hurt your image, and this is very disrespectful. That they're going to tell you that you made this and this mistake. Right? I don't know if you have any thoughts on this, because now we're dealing with real deal, the real life scenarios. Have you ever run into a situation like this?
No, but I think it's what you say is true. It would be unfair to judge someone that maybe having mistakes, but without a prior preparation. So I agree with you. Definitely, it's not fair. You cannot say that if someone is good or not in translation or in interpretation if previously they didn't give you some material to be prepared.
Right, right. Uh, well, I remember I accompanied Professor Suri Palacios to an interpretation by OIT. That happened back in 23, I think, or 22. I'm not sure. At La Colina, and Pasco Torres, who's the chief attorney over there, he wanted us to sign a contract that we would render perfect translations and this and that and this and that for cutting up a check that was like the minimum. When I received some of that material, I was checking that the material was very sketchy. Very sketchy. By that I mean that they were like drafts of what they would say because they were uh, more like uh, providing like a free report on some issues concerning tripartite dialogue that the university was trying to get themselves involved in, like for the labor ministry and labor or union leaders here in the country, and some other government offices. When I started listening to those presentations, I noticed that they didn't follow any document that they gave us. They just jumped in and started developing their ideas on their own. And we had to do that to a camera, if I'm not wrong. But that rendering wasn't rehearsed, and I didn't get any script. So I was like, my goodness, this university really needs a translation office. They need
It
some
does.
people to do this work for them, because they cannot take a faculty member and offer you something that they don't comply with. So you see, this matters in Europe, and in the United States are very serious. You cannot take it so lightly. And I was very negatively impressed about the treatment, the behavior of these professional people uh, concerning the message, because the message was important. So they just don't care about the message really. What they care about is how much this is going to cost me. How much am I willing to pay you for what I think you have to do for me? So this is so wrong. You see, this is so wrong. And I've had my share of other experiences in which people demand or pretend that you'll solve their problem. Because why would you invite speakers who don't speak Spanish to your event? It's your fault if you cannot communicate with the message that you're trying to impact, or whatever it is that you're trying to impact. So you have to take care of that business you yourself. I was also working at the faculty pharmacy with their dean, because she was a Fulbrighter, just like me and many others at the university. And well, we went to an event in Chiriquí province at UNODC, United Nations Organization for Drug and Crime. So this speaker was an American person, didn't give me anything. Many times I needed to go ahead and jump in without much preparation, really. And I noticed that if you solve that problem once, they want to stick with you, or they want you there in their team, but then they get used to that practice of not giving you the scripts or the PowerPoints or the materials. They don't want to give you much access to that, because they think you're going to steal it from them, or you're going to use it some other way, or you're going to put it somewhere else, and they don't want you to use their work. These Americans and Canadians are really, really obsessed with copyright. They think that whoever comes from Latin America generally is trying to steal their work. So you really need to be very patient. I also had another situation with veterinary faculty, veterinary science faculty that's in El Domo, and they had an event in which they were referring to animal abuse and these kinds of topics, which are very touchy. They had all speakers from American universities. I did not receive a single document for me to prepare for those interpretations. I could get out of that because language allowed me to. But the content, I had a minimum glossary of some of the terminology used. And I recall doing this also like through Zoom, we're doing it right now. And that was very challenging. And that took a while. I dared to go in, but as a way for me to gain access to some articles that I wanted to, because they need those for translation. So I provided the assistance in the interpretation, and I thought I would I could do it. But that was a challenging activity. I came out successfully anyway. But look, people are used to have you in these tight spots because it's like between the sword and the wall, right? And there you're working under this pressure. This is very stressful. Uh, the problem is that I think in our country, people don't care much about the message. They just care about organizing the activity. They want to, have their names written down on some report that we did this. But communication, well, we don't know about communication. So how could you not worry about the communication in your event? The event is not for the sake of saying that you're doing something. You need to communicate and worry about that information. So this is an issue. This is an issue all across at least the university. And if you go into the government, this is serious. In 2024, we had a visitor from some European organization that they wanted to go in uh, that was probably a general attorney's office, I think, at Ministerio Público. And well, they didn't want a professor, they wanted a student who would go ahead and solve that interpretation and communication on the topic that he or she was delivering. I had a person whom I sent, and she was very successful, and she did a good job. However, she told me what happened in there is that they assumed everybody would understand all languages as if they were in Europe, because this person came from Europe. They think everybody speaks several languages here. People have some command of another language, maybe a second language, but people don't speak 3 and 4 languages here, especially among non-specialists, people who are undergrads. They just don't have that kind of background. So a lot of by foreign I mean international speakers, foreign to Panama, they just don't take the trouble to find out about what it is like in here. And those who, are the attaches and do the contact with them, they just care about doing, and they don't care about the quality. So they think doing is all that matters, doing, not so much about doing it all right or doing it the right way. So we have a serious problem here. And that's why I think we have a shortage of interpreters. This is a field that people could go ahead and study more. And a good translation program needs training for interpretation because this is in high demand in the market. But we have to, grow a little bit more mature. Or whoever is involved in this, they need to, draft very clear contracts like, this is what I can do for you. This is what I'm not gonna do. I'm not gonna do this, right? And if you do any of this, the contract is, turned down or dissolved, and then you don't do work. So working for private sector is a tall order. I don't recommend people to do this for a private company, like to do interpretation for some private university or some private company. They don't understand any of this. All they care about is that you will do your very best and they pay you and you have to solve the problem. It doesn't work like that. At least in government and state sponsored or funded offices, there you will have at least some understanding that there must be some minimal conditions. And if you have a contract with them, it's important because in private sector they may even try to discount part of your payment based on or accusing you of not interpreting or translating properly without them not being a translator, right? They're not translators and they want to rate your work, and they're always bargaining price, costs, payments. Uh, I think many people don't want to take the trouble, and that's why they don't find in this market many people who are willing to cope, because the word is cope, with all the lack of ethics, because there's a lot of this, right? Now, here in this slide, at the bottom line issue is that the translator should be guided by the intent of the source language writer and the needs of the target language prime reader. But these two factors may also be hard to determine. In the final analysis, usually the translator personal and professional decision based on the best information available. So you are the one who, based on your experience, who could tell a person if you're going to do this work or not for them, depending on where this has to be reported, where this is going to go, or who is going to be your audience, or what's the intention behind this. So it's a very valid thing to say no if you feel you don't have the minimal conditions to do very well, to do work very well. So if they call me again and they come up with a university contract, like come and interpret for me, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it because they don't understand what a translator or interpreter does. This is serious work, because the information that you're communicating matters a lot, right? So I don't know if this reflection deals, or at least delivers a message to you.
Oh, Cárdenas, can I say something? Suri speaking.
By all means, yes.
Oh, well, you just mentioned bunch of experience we had together because we worked in team at that time when we were young and younger. And you're telling me a lot of information right now that I thought about it, but we had we haven't talked about it as translators or interpreters working in the field. And it was difficult. Now that you mention it, the future one that are here will learn through our experience, and it was hard for us because everything we were just we you just mentioned. I have experience as well, and I signed it blind. I mean, I signed contracts that they promised they will follow information and PowerPoints. I remember a lot of experience with you that we faced that they didn't follow that, and in fact they gave us information that they didn't use at all, and they save it for private information that with very challenging glossaries, different field of studies, and a lot of disrespect, I believe now. So thank you for sharing that, sharing this kind of the dark side of the job of an interpreter. And of course, it is good paid per hour, but it's a lot. It's very challenging and it's very dark. So thank you, Rafael, for keeping these memories. And we have to write about it, as you mentioned before. It's important to research and write about it and leave techniques to overcome at least something we have experienced at all.
Sure, you bet. I don't know if there is anybody who is willing to say something that has occurred or happened concerning these misunderstandings. So if you haven't had any experience yet, it's important that you realize that you play an important role every time you get embarked into any of these missions to, deal with communication, other people's communication. It's a big responsibility. That's all I can say. All right, take a look at this case. Let me know if this is well dealt with. Let me just highlight a bit here. Yeah, I'd like to know your opinion about this. You have the original, then you have translation, not conversion. You have imprecise translation and then precise translation. Eh, Let me know what you think about the process that transpired here, please. See if I could list this with the numbers, at least to have like an organization here. So what's your opinion about this process? So what is going on here, please?
Maybe in English it's measurement is different from ours. They use more, I think, inches. That's why the number 4 is the most precise, because for us it's more common to have centimeters.
Well, I would say that there in our Latin culture, we don't use inches when we translate in this type of event. We say something like, estaba a punto de lograrlo, something like that. But I don't think we would go into exact numbers. That's my opinion.
Right, I agree with that. The interpretation would be, or the idea, the message to be delivered is, está a segundos de la meta, por ejemplo. But the intention, telling that it was very, very close to the line, finishing line. But here it is an imprecision in the measurement that as the partner, I mean, Hanik mentioned, it's a matter of usage. In English, they use a different table. I mean, they use the inches, yards, and in our case, we use meters, centimeters, and that offers a difference that can fall into an imprecision, and we have to be exact. So that's why precise translation would indicate exact amount of what 2 inches is equivalent for in centimeters.
So, at the interpretation level, I think all you can do is do the translation, no conversion, right? That's all you can do for interpretation, because you don't have the time, okay, to provide like measurements or conversion. Now, when you translate, you could probably go into the imprecise or very precise um, translation, depending on how much time you uh, count on the type of document. If it is something technical, maybe the conversion is necessary. If it is something non-technical, maybe it's not enough to go into that far, into
Right,
precision.
right, because in within his speaking and in interpretation, it sounds so unnatural. We can't.
Mhm. Money seems to be another challenging uh, aspect of translation. So when there is a possibility of confusion, the considered source language writer will specify using any one of a number of standard notations such as US dollar or the abbreviation MN for moneda nacional, right? Meaning legal tender of the country involved. The US dollar is frequently taken as a standard due to the relatively low inflation rate of this currency. But the dollar also changes in value over time. The translator should avoid making any conversion from one currency to another because of the great fluctuations in conversion rates over the years. So here's some very good advice uh, concerning using money. Okay. I remember when I was a student of translation in the English department, and Professor Yvette de Puente was the coordinator of the graduate programs that for el posgrado or the graduate program in translation, the final project was a financial report, issued by the uh, Ministerio de Economía y Finanzas. And that was like, I don't remember, but approximately 15 pages long financial report dealing with currencies and numbers and all that, all those financial pieces of information. This assignment, I think, was especially challenging because a lot of this is material for research. Uh, Translators who are in the field, they have criteria and opinions or suggestions or recommendations concerning what to do with these kinds of documents. But in general terms, I would say this is the most challenging there is for a translator because it's far away from what we normally do. What I remember her words were that she told us, well, I'm giving you this financial report because you cannot find this translated anywhere. That was what she was worried about, that we would find something already prepared, or that very same document but in English, that we would just report to her, instead of attempting to go ahead and deal with all the struggle of translating such a financial report. This is what they call it, los estados financieros. I don't remember exactly what that was, but it was especially challenging. I don't know if you recall this experience. Any of the faculty members here who studied at that time. If you do, you want to say something, and if you remember that, um, because I still remember how much work that was. Okay. I don't know if you recall any of this. For the same matter, have you ever translated financial statements, or these kinds of information, these kinds of technical reports?
Well, I think we live as English majors, we all go through this type of information every now and then, because we have to be exposed to the language, and we have to. It is not a matter of choice; it's we have to. And then probably people had also traveled to United States. I studied the master's in the United States, and then I was living through these situations, like going to the supermarket and looking at measurements and amounts and money, dealing with that. For example, that wouldn't be much a difference for me, but when studying for the masters, I was living in the borderline with Canada, and the university they have to apply this the change, because there were, I mean, 80% of the population, at least in the master's degree, were, that's too much, like 60% could be, we're Canadians coming to the American side to study at the university. So they have the conversion made because they pay with Canadian dollars, and it was an American university. So that was my experience going through these differences. And it was a very touristic side, so they will have always to deal with this type of tourists in the city.
So you mean you did a conversion from American dollars to Canadian dollars, or?
No. That I was exposed, so I kind of had the experience in what does it mean. But no, if it is an interpretation, for example, if it's an interpretation to be done. I hadn't gone to that situation particularly, but I would say that that is an information that should be rendered by the person who needs the interpretation. But we cannot make the conversation to translate it because first the fluctuations, second that's not an information that comes from us. I mean, it's not our need to be interpreting the information, but that's something that should be given to us so that we can then provide an accurate information. And at some points, yes, it is challenging. We cannot, unless we can do that by checking, because that's daily, what is the currency change every day. I have done that in Mexico City, for example, because yeah, it's different. We're having dollars, and almost every day they have changes in the peso and equivalence. Change the currency rate is different almost every day, 2 days, a week, but it's not very stable. So we have to be checking that constantly. So yes, if you tell me if I am rendering or interpreting for someone, that's a specific information that we should be given. We cannot invent it, or it is not our task to search for that information and then provide something that we are not giving. That's who wants or needs the interpretation to be done. My comment. How I see it.
Oh, thanks. Well, of course, there is a big challenge behind all this because every time you're on the line, you're there to solve a communication problem, and communication gets in the way of projecting yourself as a professional if you don't really handle or have some idea what to do. So yeah, some work is rejected because of this, because not because people are insecure, it's because of the potential very negative consequences of not performing, with the right information and taking the blame for any misunderstanding, especially if there is something legal involved, right? So this is an important lesson to know. Okay, we have some cognates also that I think deserve our attention here. As I was saying, when I put this PowerPoint in classroom, this is information that is not going to go away. As you know, a PowerPoint has a lighter format compared to a PDF. So the PDFs, yes, will have to be taken down because they take up too much space from my Gmail, Gmail email account. And that has limited space. And there are other things that we're storing there. So unfortunately, I cannot keep the books, so make sure you download them. But concerning this is going to be there and it's going to remain there. Those two PowerPoints I was referring to, and the analysis sheets will go under a title named Summative Assessment Number 3. That's going to be Summative Assessment Number 3. You're going to find the PowerPoints containing the cognates and another PowerPoint containing the historical information. So it's not only cognates, but also the proverbs and that kind of thing. Very good. Here we go. Politica. Take a look. Politics or policy in a political sense. It's not the same as a policy in insurance. Instead of that is póliza de seguro. You have a populación. Okay. That is a serious Anglicism. I think more than a cognate, it's more like an Anglicism. The type that appears in Spanish-speaking communities in the U.S. probably. You have the populación, that's not the meaning. There must be, of course, población pueblo, right? The act of populating an empty region. It's like the act of populating it, sending people in there or people being born in a region, somewhere empty. Look at this one, posición, it's a partial false cognate. So physical position, it's okay, but not as a viewpoint or argument. Since we use punto de vista is more precise, right? Look at precioso, that's a partial false cognate of great value. That means beautiful also. María es una niña preciosa. We have more like preciso, exact. So also necessary, es preciso hacerlo ahora. Okay. There is also presumir, it's a false cognate, to boast or brag. Unlike suppose, instead of suponer, supongo que estará aquí, suponer, preciso partial false cognate, exact, right? That's repeated, unfortunately. We have presumir, that's repeated also. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, but we have others here. Pretender, it's a false cognate. To attempt or try. Pretende ser jefe. Okay, that's okay. To attempt or try. Different from simulate or assume an identity, right? We must use their simular fingir. Okay. Private, it's a partial false cognate. So narrower meaning than in English. It's usually restricted to mean personal, carta privada, sorry. Procurar, it's a partial false cognate, to obtain. That also usually is to attempt or try. It's procurar, to obtain. This is a very difficult word because, for example, here we have a public servant's position, procurador. Okay. And I've seen in administrative staff, they have procurement office. And that's departamento de compra. And that's a very tricky cognate because you have procurador, and that means something entirely different. It's more like general attorney, no oficial de compra, or whatever you want to call that, procurement person in that department in a company or organization. So it's a very difficult one to deal with. Okay, take a look here. We have some other proverbs that we're including. So this one, no me importa un pito. I could care less, right? That's harsh, but that's a very exact, precise and accurate translation. I could care less. No se ganó Zamora en una hora, right? Rome wasn't built in a day. Okay, that's very clear. However, I think the Spanish version is not as popular with Zamora y hora. I don't think I've seen that very often. Maybe a couple of times. No tener remedio, to be beyond help, okay? Beyond help. No vale un comino, not worth anything. Obra empezada, medio acabada. The hardest part is the beginning. Obrar en poder de, in the hands of. Right? There are others, right? Like on behalf of also, and others. That's a more legalistic phraseology of that sort, you know. Padre mercader, hijo caballero, nieto limosnero, right? Shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves in 3 generations. Pagar a plazos, payment on the installment plan. Pagar en la misma moneda, to get even. Palabra, word of honor. Para colmo de males, the last straw. I don't know if you could think of another one for para colmo de males.
Maybe
So
para
yeah,
matar.
pardon, will you say that again?
Para colmo de males, maybe, y para rematar.
Okay.
Use it.
Yeah, there are others, like to make matters worse, or if coming if worse comes to worst, things like that, of that sort, that goes in that direction. Very
Maybe we
good.
say y para colmo, yeah.
Yeah, y para el colmo, exactly.
Can we say
Okay.
on that one? On top of that,
On top of that, exactly.
mm,
So all of these perform an important function of allowing us to, gain a repertoire, because that's the idea of being exposed to all of this information. So, as I said, I'm going to be extracting these several topics from these PowerPoints, and then I'm going to separate them into different documents if, for us to perform some operations, some translation and analysis of operations, and some reflections concerning this content. Because I think we've seen quite a few so far. In 3 weeks, we have covered quite a few of these proverbs, of these cognates, and this deserves our attention, treatment, analysis. Okay. This is a topic that the Spanish department also deals with a lot. They speak about los cognados, los hispanicismos, anglicismos. Of course, they put it in other terms, but it's the same essentially. It's the same problem essentially, that a lot of English has flowed into other languages, other European languages. So you have these words that are untranslatable, and now you see why, right? Now you see why this belong to a category. So it's because of culture that we cannot provide like word for word analysis for any of them. Look at, for example, pagar en la misma moneda, to get even. There is no way I would preserve any meaning if I say it like to pay with the same coin, or to pay in the same currency, or to pay you back with the current your same. That doesn't make any sense. So to get even, that's the intention, really. Okay. So a little bit more on interpretation, because today is our last day of the third week, and I think it's worth the effort of taking the time of talking about interpretation. So we have the history of modern conference interpretation. It's important for us to look at this. So the division between translation and interpretation was boosted by the growth in conference interpretation in the 20th century. Prior to this growth, the need for interpretation at international conferences was limited by several factors. For one, the number of such conferences was much more limited in the past due to the less intensive level of international relations, as well as logistical problems, such as transportation. But more importantly, up to the 20th century, diplomacy was generally conducted in a single language. We should know it was, what language was that? So before the 20th century, what language was the diplomacy generally conducted in? So what was that language?
Before the 20th century was, as I said, Latin.
So up until the 20th century, diplomacy was generally conducted in a single language. What language was that?
French.
Right, exactly, French. That was the superpower. And they exerted soft power through diplomacy. And that was the language of communication, of international communications, until English gained that, or, achieved that level and importance. So in the period of the great empires, the language would be that of the imperial power. Okay, this is important. So, for example, under the Romans, citizens involved in trade or political relations, they had to speak in Latin. So there wasn't any interpretation required. So in the past, ever since there was a Roman Empire, if you could not speak Latin, then you could not be a part of the discussion. You needed Latin in order to defend yourself and make your point or do whatever you needed to do concerning business or citizenship rights or so. Later on, with the advent of other empires, then that vernacular gained prestige. So before English, there was French for a long, long time, right? Very influential language also. So through the Middle Ages, Latin continued as the language of the educated European, to be replaced by French in the 17th century. Okay? We read here about the Treaty of Westphalia, 1648 until World War I. French was the dominant language of diplomacy, and there continued to be no need for conference interpretation. That had a lot to do about France being under the rule of Napoleon, right? He gained all this importance in Europe. If special circumstances arose where particular individual at an international meeting could not speak the dominant language of diplomacy, there was always the device of whispering. I'm not sure what the proper pronunciation is. Coucheter, I think it's whispering, which is someone interpreting, to the person's ear. This is in order to accommodate him or her. In this procedure, the interpreter would sit behind and to one side of the principal and whisper a running interpretation, sometimes very condensed, of the proceeding. This procedure is still in use today, where technical facilities are limited, or where heads of state meet on a one-on-one basis or face-to-face basis. I was checking on TV yesterday that Prime Minister of Japan attended the White House, and she spoke in Japanese to the media, but she had an interpreter whispering for her, and I'm not sure if the same person was also whispering for Donald Trump, because I'm not so sure if the Japanese Prime Minister is fluent in English. We assume so, but that's not always the case, that these international visitors always know all the languages. We know, for example, that Netanyahu speaks very good English, and he addresses the Not ever the European Parliament, because I don't think they're going to let him speak over there. But at least at the U.S. Congress, he speaks in English to them, and he is welcome over there, and he speaks English. Other world leaders, we know that they speak English, but they don't want to speak English in front of media. Okay, because I think they will be conceding if they do that. They'll do it privately because of image. So, but the 20th century brought a much more complex set of international arrangements, okay, with many more actors, less disposed for political and nationalistic reasons to accept any one language as a dominant one. Furthermore, the number and subject of international conferences grew or has grown explosively, with many technical ones which require specialized vocabulary, jargon, and knowledge. The first signs of significant change came with the Versailles Peace Conference in 1919 at the end of World War I. The French felt theirs should be the sole working language, but U.S. President Woodrow Wilson and the British Prime Minister Lloyd George, neither of whom spoke French, argued that English should also be used, since the English-speaking world was now larger than the French-speaking world. French resisted, presented arguments that Italian should be a working language too, but with French as number one, authoritative. In the end, both French and English were accepted as equally authoritative, and with this decision, some 200 years of French domination of the language of diplomacy came to an end. The mechanics of interpretation at the 1919 conference were handled by a small staff of consecutive interpreters, aided by a larger group of individual and trilingual secretaries to assist with the drafting of written documents. Post-World War I League of Nations also used consecutive interpretation, although the process was becoming increasingly unwieldy due to the number of languages involved and the technical nature of much of the material. There was also much debate over whether the short or long form of consecutive interpretation was better. Those advocating the short form argued that the interpreter should interpret one sentence at a time in order to minimize the possibility of error. So now we're running into some technical terms here. Consecutive interpretation is the speaker of the language, of the source language, would provide a sentence, and the short version would be for the interpreter to render interpretation to a sentence only. The longer version is, of course, the speaker would provide longer, segments of speech or, language, longer than a sentence, I mean by that, and moving from idea to idea, and then the interpreter will go ahead and provide a consecutive interpretation. Of course, at of longer chunks, a little bit more fluid, but at the expense of probably making mistakes or condensing information and some other issues that could arise, in the process of rendering longer interpretations. The supporters of the long form held that much meaning and continuity was lost this way, and it was better for an interpreter to come in at infrequent intervals, right? In extreme version, this meant that the speaker would give his or her whole speech uninterrupted, and then the interpreter would take notes and speak at the end and give the speech all over again in the second language. This is like the extreme form of consecutive interpretation. So there's a short version, long version, and an extreme version of consecutive interpretation. So in case you did not know, there are three kinds, right? When this occurred, there was an increasing pressure for the interpreter to compress the speech and simply give a summary of it in order to save time. It would sometimes create strange situations when a very short summary by an interpreter would reveal that much of the original speech was irrelevant stuff, a fluff. There was also the opposite case when the interpreter's version might be far more flowery and eloquent than the original. So problems, right, arose. it was very tempting for an intelligent, eloquent, and frustrated interpreter to improve on the original speech, and some did. So the technology of telephones made a key breakthrough between the wars when the International Business Machine Company proposed to the League of Nations that its newly developed system of microphones, wire switching mechanisms, and listening headsets would be used for simultaneous interpretation. This could now be accomplished in such a way that the interpreter could work into the second language as the speaker spoke the first. So technology also made the process a lot more expedited. The the rising of simultaneous interpretation, which is simultaneous, and because you're gonna need a booth and silence and listening and then rendering at the same time. This is especially challenging and requires equipment. So such an arrangement for simultaneous interpretation was used by the League of Nations, and other organs in the 1930s. So that was the first major use of the IBM systems, and thus the very first real test of simultaneous interpretation came on the trials of an international military tribunal in Nuremberg, Germany, for Nazi war crimes after World War II. By then, that IBM was around 20 years old and aging. But the trials were complex, long, and cover a wide range of subject matter. But with some improvisation, the equipment and the interpreters stood well, and simultaneous interpretation became the feature of the international meetings. And so it was that natural that the newly formed United Nations Secretariat would adopt the simultaneous approach. So, long story short is that this simultaneous interpretation, aided by technology and communication devices and equipment, surpassed a consecutive interpretation of a short, long, and extreme versions. And simultaneous interpreters grew in number and practice. This made it very necessary. Right. With the price of dropping some accuracy, of course, that was valid, very effective. So the issue of working languages in the UN was also a matter. I'm talking about conference interpretation history. So the preliminary San Francisco UN conference had shown that using multiple languages in translation increased the paper output geometrically. The San Francisco conference published all written documents in 5 official languages: English, French, Russian, Chinese, and Spanish, and ended up with 78 tons of paper, okay, or an average daily output of 500,000 sheets. Upon starting their operations in New York headquarters, the Secretariat was able to initially keep the working languages down to 2, English and French. Although Spanish-speaking nations that were a third of the voting strength of the United Nations were then later included, right? And there was a third language. In the Organization of American States, the OAS, okay, there are only 2 working languages, Spanish and English. Well, there are 4 official: Spanish, English, Portuguese, and French. The Surinamese have not insisted on adding Dutch. Okay. So I think in general terms, this is what there is concerning the history of interpretation. So we know now that a lot of it had to do with the Nuremberg trials. That's how simultaneous interpretation came to be through an IBM switchboard and equipment that allowed communication. And then later, as translation was made available in different languages, this became the standard. So, and of course, there came some much necessary training for simultaneous interpretation, right? Okay, I'd like to know if you understand what the joke is behind this. This is cultural information, culture. Let me know if you understand what the joke is here. Because you have two translations. If you could explain them to me, I think I'll be more than satisfied because dealing with culture, as you know, is a real challenge. Let me just make sure I make this very visible too. Sorry about that. Changing here colors in order to make things visible. There we go. What is the joke here?
The first one is is really interesting because it says El Corte Inglés and it's all over Spain. It's a kind of contradiction, but that's the name of the store, right? And, and of course, in the second one, it has to be very careful. We have to be careful with translate because it means this word means something different in other language. So once again, a translator needs to have a background information. It is very important.
Yes, concerning the first one, what exactly is a laughing matter here? What is a laughing matter about this translation?
The word is poses of, because that is get rid of.
Right, exactly, exactly. Is there anything else that you find odd about the first one?
Why saying El Corte Inglés? I mean, using Spanish there.
Yeah, this is one thing. Um, as it seems,
So the use of the article to the home, to the decoration, and to the sports, as if they were
yeah,
ones.
that's like cacophonic.
Yes.
You two, right? And if you're
Cap-
devoted,
Capitalization is
okay, exactly. So this could be avoided. So in order to make this very first one, poor translation, not a laughing matter, what will you say instead? Or how will you render this in proper English? How will you fix this? Right. So, the second one, there was a big problem over there, but we are not that knowledgeable of Brazilian Portuguese as to fix something or offer some option here. But this is, an anecdote of the kinds of mistakes made. A rendezvous lounge, so that when translated to Portuguese is a motel or something like that, it has some connotation that is rather sexual. And there was a big mistake over here. Yeah, for the first one,
Um,
mm-hmm,
try the first one.
sure.
Something like El Corte Inglés has 16 stores all over Spain. They are devoted to fashion and its accessories, as well as to home goods, decoration, and sports.
That's a lot more natural, a lot more natural. Very good. So yes, that's the thing that we have to aim at being more idiomatic, exactly. And terminology can also become a problem here. It's like huela en cueros that we were talking about before, that you will travel on a jet, and that's not, it's very funny. That it's a joke, really. Okay, okay. It's already 11:56. I don't have anything else for the day. That's the end of Friday. We're closing our session here, but before I proceed to do so, I'd like to remind you that we have, you're going to have also in classroom some work concerning this PowerPoint content on history and idiomatic and cultural use of English, or English and Spanish words. I'm going to be asking for some reflection work, but this is something that you will be doing over the 4.5 months break that we're going to be doing. You're also expected to send me some other minor assignments. Those could be sent to my mail, no problem. But the ones that I have labeled as summative assessment, they're very much required, and I need those. So make sure you send me those. And so far, we're ending here with 3 summative assessments activities: research, the paper, the essay, the reaction paper you wrote, you sent me already. Then this other coming one from Brinton, Cruz, Ortiz, and White, which is several assignments to do. And our last one, which is going to be posted in the system by the weekend. I'm going to be posting that one. Remember that I'm taking down the ebooks. And that's all I have to do to talk to you in the meantime. Well, let's see. We'll be seeing each other. I don't know, probably a coordination for the certificate program will talk to us a little bit more about the schedule or so. It's been my pleasure to be with you during these 3 weeks, and I hope to continue and finish this certificate program soon enough by mid-year. So in the meantime, all I can say is goodbye, and we'll be in touch. Remember
Thank you
that you
very
need to inform me. Sure, inform me if you are interested in the idea of creating a research group that will be officialized at the Universidad. That's it. Thank you.
Just one question to be sure of what to do in classroom. If you said that the ebooks, we need to download them. Just those books, that's all we need to do to download?
Yes, the books is because, I'm trying to enroll you with resources for your translation classes, courses. I don't know, maybe you're gonna need that for translation work that you're doing, or maybe you're writing a book, maybe you're writing an article. So those books could be very useful and helpful in this regard. This will take you in directions that you probably haven't considered before. So my intention is that at least I'm giving you 12 books. That's what I have given you so far. Premiatics and from Vasquez Sayora's book, that's one. That's a pair. That's the initial pair we began with. And then you have 10 more now in Google Classroom. So I have already given out 12 books, ebooks. By that I mean ebooks.
Thank you so much for sharing them. Those
Sure.
Suri? Well, thank you, Professor Cardenas, for all of the knowledge shared today. Well, as he said before, we will be meeting in August. Now we are going to have a long break until the 3rd of August. So that last module is going to be from the 3rd to the 8th of August of this year, of course. My dear participants, God bless you all. Have a nice day and enjoy your break. Do your assignments. They are required. And remember to download the ebooks that Professor Cardenas shared with us. They have very good material. God bless you all. Have a nice day.